presentation is about self-interest in global warming, leading into my question, how do people's self-motivation damage the Earth and how can we change it? First, we have to define what global warming is. Global warming is caused by greenhouse gases, and the most common greenhouse gases on Earth are nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor, and this causes the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect, according to Multimedia, a writer that specializes in science, health, and the environment, the greenhouse effect occurs because the sun bombards the Earth with enormous amounts of radiation, which strike Earth's atmosphere in the form of visible light. And according to NASA, when the Earth is in equilibrium, 30% of sunlight is reflected back into space, while 70% is absorbed by the Earth's atmosphere. Unfortunately, due to the amount of humans on Earth releasing CO2 and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, this percentage is now higher. This is seen in Glacier National Park. When Glacier National Park first opened, there were 150 glaciers there, but as of 2015, only 26 of these glaciers left were big enough to be considered glaciers. As you can see in this picture, in 1913, there was an abundance of glaciers in the park, but as of 2012, there's barely anything for anyone to see left. And according to the United States Geological Survey, all these glaciers will disappear by 2030 or 2080. And people are afraid that if these glaciers continue to disappear, as well as the melting of the polar ice caps, the Earth will become flooded. And this is seen in Bob Dylan's song Blowing in the Wind, when he says, yes, but how many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to sea? His fears are valid because according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Earth's global sea level was 2.6 inches above the global average in 1993, and it continues to rise every year by 1/8 of an inch. This not only floods coastal cities and towns, but also causes shoreline erosion, and the salt water intrudes freshwater ecosystems and freshwater aquifers. The next problem we have to find and address is deforestation. Deforestation is when big forests are cut down for recreational use for humans, such as building things or printing money. And when these trees are cut down, it causes less CO2 to become taken out of the atmosphere because plants always take in CO2 to release oxygen as a byproduct from photosynthesis. And this is addressed in Margaret Thatcher's speech to United Nations National Assembly, where she says, at the same time as this is happening, we are seeing the destruction on a vast scale of tropical forests, which are uniquely able to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. When carbon dioxide releases into the atmosphere and due to the greenhouse effect, it causes the Earth to become hotter. This not only makes these forests drier, but it also creates forest fires. And according to the National Interagency Fire Center, there's a huge increase in the average forest fires in the past 38 years. And not only are they more frequent, but they're also bigger. According to Zeke Hosberger, a researcher in climate science in California, 14 of the 20th largest wildfires on record have occurred in the past 15 years. This is because there's a bigger amount of accumulated burnable vegetation on Earth. As you can see in this graph, in 1970, there were less than 50 forest fires in the United States western states. But in 2015, there's almost 150. And this is because of the amount of dry burnable vegetation and the amount of Earth's increasing temperatures. And this is possibly due to people's self-interest. Self-interest, defined by Merriam-Webster, is one's own interest or self-advantage, also known as a concern for one's own advantage and well-being. This is known as psychological egoism. According to Emerson Westcott, a professor of philosophy at Alfred University, psychological egoism is a theory that all of our actions are basically motivated by self-interest. This is because people like to experience a release of dopamine. Dopamine is known as a feel-good chemical. When it's released into your brain, it makes you feel good, and you want to do these actions that give you this released dopamine over and over again. That's also why drugs are so addicting. And according to Harold Stitt at Many Vienna's Institute of Pharmacology, people are always seeking pleasure so that they can reach higher and higher dopamine levels. Dopamine is a reason why a lot of people are constantly seeking to satisfy their cravings. This is seen in the term of global warming because when BBC News and Stanford did a study asking people about if global warming is a huge problem for them, 51% of people found that it is serious for the US if it's not addressed, and 53% of people found that it is a problem. But when they were asked about if it's something they need to worry about now, 76% found it wasn't. They found it was a problem for people to fix in the future, for future generations. And 39% of people found it something they need to address now. As a result, since people don't think it's a problem for them, they won't want to change. And this is a problem because when global warming was researched by scientists, it found if it's not fixed in the next 10 years, people wouldn't be able to go back. And this is seen in Bob Dylan's song Blowing in the Wind when he says, yes, but how many times can a man turn his head pretending he doesn't see? People would rather succumb to ignorance rather than finding a way to fix something because they want to release dopamine in their brain and do something that is good for them rather than for the good of others in the earth. This leads to my solution. My first solution is to decrease meat and dairy consumption because meat farming, especially cow farming, releases methane, and methane is the most potent greenhouse gas. Although CO2 is the most common, making up over 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. and around the world, methane traps more heat since it is more potent. And according to Bobby McGill, a president of the Society of Environmental Journalists, reducing heavy red meat consumption will lead to a per capita food and land use related greenhouse gas emissions reduction of between 15 and 35% by 2050. And if the world's 2 billion high consumers reduce their meat consumption by 40%, it would save an area of land 2 times the size of India, as well as avoiding 168 billion tons of future greenhouse gas emissions. My next solution is to increase awareness. We can do this to promote less ignorance, because as you can see in Bob Dylan's song, a lot of people would rather turn their head pretending they don't see. We can do this through ads and school lessons for young children. Some implication of this would be, first, obviously, more advertisement to increase awareness. If we have more effective advertisement as well, such as this one of a dying polar bear in the Arctic due to starvation, people would more likely want to change because they see what their choices are doing to not only the earth, but other animals as well. Next would obviously be more lessons for young children, so that you could promote less ignorance from a young age. They'd be able to know that their problem is that this problem is something that's current right now, that they have to do something. And next would be taxes on red meat consumption and dairy consumption, because if things are more expensive, people don't want to buy it. And lastly, tax deductions and breaks for people that choose to change, so that they have a release of dopamine in their brain in order to know that what they're doing is good. Some pros of my solution would obviously be less atmospheric temperature increase due to the less damage on the earth. As stated earlier by A.L. Westerling, they found a correlation between fires and increased temperatures. If we have less damage to the earth and less atmospheric temperature increase, then we have less of these trees being burned down due to forest fires. Next would obviously be less meat production, which leads to less methane output, since there's less farms around the world to release this methane. And obviously, it would be a better mindset among people, because they know it's a problem now. But unfortunately, there are also cons to my solution. First would be capitalism. People don't want to change the way they live because they want to make money for themselves. And obviously, it would be costly to provide tax deductions for everyone. And it'd be hard to enforce because people can't go around policing everything people do. Some limitations would be farmers unhappy because they have to change the way that they live and how much they produce. And obviously, stubbornness not only in farmers, but in people that want to change the way they eat. And it'd be hard to enforce, like I stated earlier, and money would be a problem due to the tax deductions. Thank you.
Okay, Gabby. Question number 1. How valid and reliable are the sources you used? How do you know and which sources did not work?
Since this is a political topic and a lot of people like to get a lot of fame from the things that they post, I need to make sure that the sources I use were either released by the government with a .org or .edu URL. And also, I stayed away from blogs because when I looked up about global warming and obviously the cow production thing, a lot of people made blogs about it because they wanted to increase awareness about it, but I'm not sure if they're actually reliable researchers or people that just wanted to post it for fun. So obviously, after doing that, I researched the people that posted even in the edu and .org websites, because I wanted to make sure that what I was getting was from someone that was a researcher or someone that was actually credible. So I first looked up their name and saw if anything popped up, and I also looked at their occupation, because one that I found was, although he seemed to be a researcher, he was researching on more economics rather than a environmental scientist or a journalist.
And question number 2. How does your conclusion respond to any of the other research or sources you examined?
So my conclusion was to decrease meat and dairy consumption, and in response to one of the sources that I found by A.L. Westerling and by Bobby McGill when he did research on the cow production. And since my solution is to decrease meat and dairy consumption, it obviously lead to less methane output like he stated, and also it responds to the fire by A.L. Westerling, because when there's less greenhouse gas emissions in the earth, it would lead to a temperature decrease, which he found a correlation in with increasing temperatures and forest fires.
Okay, thank you.